Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Great day to call on our guy, Ross Jackson. Of course, our lead over at LouisianaSports.net. Of course, Locked on Saints. If you want him on audio, you can get him there on the podcast or, of course, on the YouTube channel. Good enough to join us now. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy. Doing great. How are you holding up?
I'm doing fantastic. Okay, they cut down to 53. There were some head turners. Which was the biggest surprise for you?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger surprises to lead off the day was the movement that they made on Jonathan Abram. That was one that I didn't expect for this. And this was a hotly contested safety battle next to Tyrann Mathieu, and kind of looked like Jonathan Abram would be the guy to maybe keep that role as he wrapped it up last year, and then the team ends up moving on from him. So we'll see which way they go. Veteran Will Harris, as well as second-year safety Jordan Howden, are both kind of in that conversation, but one of the other big pieces here is that it could be procedural. We'll see. There might be an opportunity to bring Jonathan Abram back at some point as this roster will continue to shake up and kind of redevelop over the course of the next couple of days. Making the decision to make the change at punter, Lou Hedley, it's one that I think makes sense, but not one that I expected them to do, but they did it, and they roll with the fellow Aussie but rookie kicker, Matthew Hayball out of Vanderbilt. So those are a couple of the big ones. And then one of the other big transactions was just them moving Kendre Miller, the running back that had been absent for all of training camp after being injured during the first day of individual drills, moving him to injured reserve with the designation to return. So after 4 weeks, he'll have the opportunity to come back. And right now, Jordan Mims will kind of hold down that role.
What did you make of, or what should we make of Jacob Kibodi not making the team after a really good preseason and really a sentimental favorite? What happens for him now?
Yeah, I think they would love to get him back on the practice squad, give him an opportunity to continue to develop. We've seen this a few times with the Saints, especially at the running back position. Everyone loved Devine Ezigbo. They moved on from him. Everybody loved Boston Scott. They moved on from him. This is kind of a thing that they do. They really like a certain type when it comes to their running back room, and maybe Jacob Kibodi just needs a little bit more development somewhere, and so wouldn't be surprised to see him back on the practice squad. He could certainly get picked up on waivers, but he'd have to get picked up off of waivers by a team that's willing to add them to their active roster. A little bit tougher and taller a task. And once he clears waivers, though, if he clears waivers, he would be eligible to return to the Saints here on the practice squad.
On Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Give him a follow there. You can read his stuff over at LouisianaSports.net. I can tell you firsthand, watching Ross work today was actually pretty incredible. On a day like this where the news never stops and making sure you're on top of the waiver wire and everything was pretty amazing. So if you want to check out all the coverage, it's there for free at LouisianaSports.net. We also got a little bit of disappointing news from a Saints perspective. Khalen Saunders is going to miss time with a calf injury. What can you tell us, Ross, not only about the injury, the nature of the injury, and then what do they do? How do they replace him?
Yeah. So the expectation is a couple of weeks for this one. Originally reported by Nick Underhill over at New Orleans Football. And one of the big things that comes from this is you got to figure out what you're going to do without him, right? I mean, you've got Brian Brzee, you've got Nathan Shepard, who have been excellent all throughout training camp and actually played really well during the preseason in their reps too. But those are guys that are typically more so your three-tech pass rushers that line up between the opposing guard and tackle, and then are kind of the guys that are a little bit more less the run stoppers, less the run pluggers in the middle of a defensive line. So this is where sixth-round pick Christian Boyd really comes in. He's excited. He's stoked about the fact that he made the roster because, of course, being a sixth-round pick, nothing's guaranteed for you. But this is a real opportunity for him because he's going to be leaned on, especially on those early downs, to be the big body that clogs up the middle. Now, we'll see, too, the Saints could potentially end up bringing in some people from outside of the facility. They could elevate, if they bring back Jack Heflin to the practice squad, they could elevate him just like they did a few times last year. They also kept veteran defensive tackle Kendall Vickers, who can help out there as well. He's had some nice plays over the course of training camp. So they have the bodies, they have the numbers, and they have the fit in terms of the guys that would be necessary to replace a Khalen Saunders. But one of the big things that Saunders always preaches is that there should be no drop-off from starter to depth, and the Saints will be tested in exactly that once the season kicks off.
Ross, there's a couple of other people, players that specifically like to ask about, because whenever the 53 is released, and we talk about it all the time, it's not the final 53, it's the first 53, right. And sometimes you keep a guy in the 53 maybe to protect him from being signed elsewhere, then you cut him and sign him to the practice squad. Is Mason Tipton a candidate for that, or is this a guy that we expect is going to be a Sunday guy for this team?
Yeah, I was really. That's another one that I was really surprised by. I think that there's certainly the opportunity for him to be one of those guys that ends up getting moved off of, and then brought back onto the practice squad. Try to sneak him through, after the initial flurry of roster moves gets made. We see that pretty often, and they could do a couple of different things in terms of how they want to get that done. But effectively, they'd have to cut him clear through waivers and then bring him back. But look, they also really like him. It was surprising to see him retained on the initial 53 based on the fact that he didn't participate in any of the preseason games. But look, when he was out there performing and he was out there during training camp, he was the best. He was one of the best wide receivers on the field outside of the top two guys and everything. So, this could go either way for him. He's a name that I would definitely be watching, not to give him the, one of those kind of like last in, first out kind of treatments or anything like that. But, these are the types of things that happen where sometimes you end up moving somebody or moving somebody to injured reserve at a later time, or you end up finding somebody on waivers that you really want to add, but you got to make a number somewhere. And he could be one of those guys that ends up coming back off the roster and then maybe coming back to the practice squad. So he's a name that I would just keep a close eye on over the course of the next 48 hours or so. That's where you're going to see the major kind of flurries of this. But really, it's over the course of the first 2 weeks that you'll see this roster continue to change. So it'll be a little tough for him to stick around, but if he's able to, it shows you how much the Saints really like him.
Thoughts on Anthony Orji making the 53?
Yeah, this was a guy that looked like he was going to make it from the very beginning. He has grown so much since he was, made the practice squad at this time last year. Plays multiple positions in the defense now. I asked Dennis Allen about him. He said that he's shown improved kind of knowledge of the game, like improved understanding of the system, and just improved play overall. So they're really impressed with the growth that he's shown from 2023 here to 2024. He's a guy that I do not expect them to potentially try to move on from, depending upon how they adjust their roster and things like that. I think he's one of your primary backups at that position.
Two more things for you. Ross Jackson, our guest. You can read his stuff over at louisianasports.net, always free. Of course, you can hear him on Locked On Saints. Subscribe, favorite podcast app, or YouTube. They did have practice today as well. You all had some availability. Anything of note from today?
Yeah, we mostly spent time in the locker room after they did their stuff and everything. So I think the things that are of note really are that, after speaking with some people that were around, getting the opportunity to kind of get some updates on where players are injury-wise. So it sounds like a guy like Dallin Holker, for instance, who's one of the 4 undrafted free agents to make this roster, should be good to go week 1. Seems that things are trending positively for Rashid Shaheed, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver, to open up this season as well. So those were a couple of the big updates that we were kind of able to get from our availability and all that good stuff. So trending in the right direction health-wise, and it doesn't seem yet that there's any indication of any other expectations around Marshawn Lattimore to open up the season as well. I haven't heard anything negative in terms of his chances for week 1. Haven't explicitly been told that he should be ready week 1, but certainly haven't heard anything negative there. So it seems that everything's positive health-wise leading into the opener, the opener in a couple weeks.
My apologies. Last thing,
Nope.
With there being roughly 1,000 free agents today, where are the spots the Saints might be looking among free agents and players on the waiver wire?
Yeah, I imagine offensive line is still a spot that they'll continue to keep an eye out on. A guy that's familiar in Lael Collins is the guy that, hit the market. He was the guy that made a lot of sense for them last year as well when they were trying to figure out what they were going to do at right tackle. So he's a name that I would keep an eye out on, but that's certainly a spot that I would keep an eye out on is that kind of entire offensive line unit. Another player or another position I'd watch is safety. Like, this one could get really interesting. Is there a safety that ends up being moved on from out there that ends up providing a better opportunity or maybe a better fit than the guys that they have kind of competing in the building, who Dennis Allen mentioned never really jumped up and took the spot? A guy like Lewis Stein, for instance, or Steen, for instance, former Georgia safety is out on the market now, surprisingly, former first-round pick. Yeah. So there's a couple of those spots that I could definitely see them continuing to roll there. Wide receiver could be a spot as well. I think for the most part, those are going to be the ones where I could see the most movement. I think otherwise they feel pretty set with where they are.
He is Ross Jackson on Twitter at Ross Jackson NOLA. Give him a follow. Of course, subscribe to Locked On Saints podcast and read him as our guy, LouisianaSports.net, leading our Saints coverage. We appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.